I know that technically it's March and really it's Women's History Month and no longer Black History Month, but unfortunately Black History Month is the shortest of the months because it's February and I got sick, and so that kind of delayed things. So I'm still going to talk about Black stuff and I don't give a shit. When it comes to things like intersectional feminism and what feminism means to me as a Black queer woman, it gets very complicated, and I'm gonna treat this as kind of like half a Black History Month video and half the beginning of my feminist dialogue series that I'm gonna be doing, just in general. And I think that growing up, I never really knew what feminism was, but I always grew up around very strong matriarchal people. My mother was the primary breadwinner in my household. All of my aunties were pretty much the matriarchs of the family, really carried everything forward. And so I was growing up in a sort of, a social quagmire where all of the women I knew were really the ones going out there doing things and working really hard, and the men were either staying at home or had a much more passive role in maintaining the family structure. And yet patriarchy is still so vibrant in it. My father was a stay-at-home father, which I deeply appreciate and I think was extremely valuable, but he still wanted to be treated with sort of the role of breadwinner. He wanted to be treated with all the stereotypical, like, I'm the father and you answer to me and I am this and I am that. And I remember at a very young age feeling like, well, like, mom's the one who's in charge. I mean, when you watch a show, the person who holds the purse is the one who pays it, who, like, is head of the house. I'm like, well, mom's the one who works. The only reason why you think you should be head of the house is because you're a man. And that doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why does making you a man make you that important? And I think that was my way growing up, of, like, seeing my mother be in charge. And my mother very much often would show me media, and we watched movies or shows where women were very empowered. I grew up watching Buffy, watching Xena. My mom would watch the X-Files and things like that. So I grew up knowing that women could be powerful, and I grew up around strong women of color the most of my life. But feminism was a strange concept to me because I think for a lot of us in our early years, we were taught sort of slow feminism through the girl power movement, the Spice Girls, the Smurfette token female character that would be in shows and media. I think for me, Lola Bunny is probably one of I'm one of her biggest defenders as a character, because I feel like that character was very meaningful at the age that she first appeared. Not because she was perfect, because she showed women doing something that I didn't see women doing. Growing up in the Black community, there are girls who play basketball, but female basketball is such is so dismissed by most sports aficionados, that seeing Lola Bunny do what she did in that movie reminded me of all the girls I grew up with who played basketball and were good at basketball, were still beautiful and feminine. It was like, oh, here's a character on TV in a movie who does that thing. That's great. It's these sort of like micro lessons in feminism through sort of the pop culture lens of girl power of the 90s. That's how I started growing up, like Kim Possible, all those kind of things. And it wasn't until, I would say, college that I really took on the label of a feminist because of the book Half the Sky. It was talking about basically the struggles that women go through in other countries, women who are child brides and who have ruptured fistulas, and women who are raped in war-torn countries, because rape is seen as a form of sort of warfare. And to me, it was that understanding that just being female could open you up to those kind of things was a call for me that I had to do more and be more aware of these things. Because when you grow up in a social circle or bubble that is different from the norm, you believe that that is the truth. You believe that, oh, my mother is the breadwinner, there's no such thing as inequality. Like, I know it's not because my mother does this. And you think that because you've seen a few people make progress, that all progress has been made. And I think through school and reading and education, reading a lot of books when I was in college about women's issues and women's studies, really put the terms and words in my head that allowed me to be a smarter, more informed person about gender inequality that I didn't fully understand but knew was there. Like, I knew that there was a difference between my brother and myself of how we were treated in our household because he was a boy, and that my father was afraid of me losing my virginity and being with someone than he was of my brother. And through reading and educating myself, I learned those things. And that was just learning about mainstream feminism, which ended up being mostly about white women. And slowly but surely, I started to read more stuff about black feminism, cliche bell hooks, Melissa Harris Perry, Alice Walker, and really understanding what womanism was. And that spoke to me in a lot of ways as well. But at the same time, there was a disconnect because a lot of that comes from Southern slavery black roots, which on the one hand I relate to as, I know that my ancestors were slaves, but my ancestors, at least that I know for sure on my mother's side, were Maroons from Jamaica. And so there's a little bit of a cultural context that was lost for me. But as I got older and I did more research, I'm like, okay, I am a feminist. But I didn't really get good at it until I was much older, because I think one of the things I find frustrating about when we have feminist dialogues about like choice feminism and all these kind of things is that a lot of it is based on the very early feelings and very visceral emotions of like really frustrated young 18, 19, very youthful 20-somethings who are on the one hand just wrapping their minds around these things for the first time and are just very excited and very willing to put their opinions out there, and not either people who have spent more time thinking about it and dealing with it, or people who are older and have sort of gone through the runs of it. For example, like myself, the kind of feminist I was at 18 is very different from the feminist I am now. Now I understand intersectional issues. I understand, intersectional feminist. I understand the issues of queer, transgender, disabled issues, and those things are wrapped up and more important to me. But this is specifically about black feminism. I want to say this. I know that there are a lot of women out there who are black, who don't consider themselves feminist because of the history that feminism has had with black women. And I think that's a fairly valid point. I think, and I will get into this at another longer time, there are a lot of reasons why black women may reject feminism and may more so embrace womanism, or just don't take any label. But for me, the reason why I choose the label of feminist and why I involve myself in that is because the label with all the baggage is still meaningful to me. For me, when I say I'm a feminist, and specifically an intersectional feminist, there's an image that's there. And while there may be things that I am not fully comfortable with in terms of other roots, I do think that when I say I'm an intersectional feminist, it sums up what I believe as a person. I believe that there is importance in understanding the differences that affect women from different socioeconomic, racial, class, sexual orientation, able-bodied mannered ways, and that's important to understand. And as a black woman specifically, feminism is important to me because it's another thing that we have been a part of throughout history that we never got credit for until later on. I mean, when we think about feminist icons, do we put Sojourner Truth in with that, even though she clearly is one? No. And so for me, my role as a black feminist is to reclaim that and put her up there and be like, no, this was a feminist woman, a woman who fought for women equality, and to have black women be seen as women and called out the discrimination that black women dealt with. I think of Ida B. Wells, and I think of, even the women from Hidden Figures who were just now getting their dues. All of these great women whose accomplishments were lost or pushed down in history or whitewashed. I mean, the amount of things that we don't know or are not taught about gender truth is abysmal. And the amount of praise we give to people like Susan B. Anthony, who was so angry that blacks had gotten the vote before women did, that she just washed her hands of civil rights issues just in toto because she couldn't deal with that. And yet we praise her and we lift her up as this feminist icon. And to me, instead of like rejecting it, for me it's more of a battle to course correct those things. Because womanism, while I understand it, doesn't speak to me in that way. And maybe if I spent more time with it, it would. But to me, at least the womenist circles that I've been in don't talk as much about queer issues or LGBT issues the way that I would want that to be. And so for me, the intersectional part of it allows me to make it what I need it to be. And I think for a lot of us who grow up, you know, in different cultures, it's hard when you feel like everything's about white feminism. I think that the most obnoxious thing that white feminism has done is made the movement all about them, including the dialogues that we have. Everything has to get, like, choice feminism, which gets called out in a lot of ways and is spoken about how it's a waste of time because it's all about white, straight feminists who want to have sex. It's like, that's always what it ends up being about. It never takes into account that there are other kinds of women who may gravitate towards choice feminism because it makes sense for their reality. It ignores the fact that there are women of color who are bisexual who maybe align with choice feminism because it allows them to... It gravitates towards certain things that are important to them in their lifestyle and gives them a comfort in their own selves that they may not feel from mainstream feminism. No, it's always about white, straight women. And that is a frustrating factor about being a feminist in period, if you're not any of those things, is that every conversation about feminism ends up being about that. Because our voices are so pushed down. You know, when black women talk about being feminist, it's not brought up the same way it is when white women talk about it. It's all like, or it's treated as like as accomplishment. I've been reading and going through the book Why I'm Not a Feminist, and one of the things that frustrates me about that title is when she calls out like Beyonce's feminism and how, you know, that's not an accomplishment. Maybe not to her, but for me that was, because to see black women claiming feminism for themselves and claiming it loudly and proudly and knowing that Beyonce, whether you like her or not as a musician, does, you know, advocate for things that deal with women's issues. Like, Lemonade put black women at the forefront in a way that no other mainstream feminist artist is doing. I mean, when I watch movies that are considered feminist, most of them don't have anyone that looks like me at the table. Just point blank. Like, I think of movies like Legally Blonde, which are labeled as like these great feminist, you know, movies, while it makes fun of a token lesbian character and mocks her for being a more radical feminist than the lighter, softer Elle Woods. And yet we embrace that and we think that that's feminism. I grew up with people telling me that Scarlett O'Hara was this huge feminist icon. I'm like, why? She's a racist. She's a terrible person to every other woman in this book. Why are these your feminist prototypes? And if they are, what about, you know, Celie? What about Shug Avery? What about, I forget her name right now, but the mother character in Beloved? What about the main character from Their Eyes Are Watching God? What about Iola Leary? What about all of these other women who could be icons? No, you pick the ones that are most comfortable and most fitting for you. Your female empowerment doesn't mind pushing me down. And it's just... that's a struggle. You know, the struggle of being a black feminist is being aware that you're not always seen, but always having to fight to have your voice be heard. It's a constant fight. And for me, it's worth it because I also know that I have to fight to have my voice heard, period. With or without. Even if I wasn't a feminist, I still have to be loud to be heard. It doesn't matter. The point is that my voice isn't important to some people, to many people. And so at least with feminism, I surround myself with other people who I can see, okay, we're here together. We can move to build a bigger faction. And while And while I feel those frustrations, I still proudly call myself a feminist because of also the rage it incites in other people. When people are like, oh, you're a feminist, and you can see the scorn in their face, I enjoy that to a degree because I'm just like, oh, that word scares you. You've already decided who I am because of it. And it's usually negative, and it's like, oh, you're a scary lesbian. I'm like, okay, I'm taking it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think of, when I read recently the manifesto Scum by Valerie, I forget her last name, I'm sorry, I'll link to it down below. I mean, like, the visceral radical feeling she has in that text, while they may not be things that I connect with now, or maybe even 100% agree with, just that ability to be loud and rash and raw, I love. And I think that's what made me want to be a feminist, is that the idea of these women being loud and not caring, that kind of radical feminism is something that I enjoy. And that ability to just say point blank that it's wrong for me to be treated this way, and I refuse to be treated this way, to not be passive. And I don't think that it's wrong to be passive, period. I just mean that passivity of allowing things to happen to you because that's the way that things are. That ability to fight for it is why I'm a feminist. And I become a better one slowly because I fight not just for myself, but for black women and black queer women and specifically bisexuality. Like, knowing myself more and understanding who I am as a person is why I gravitate toward these labels and why I take on the labels. To me, the labels are important because I want you to know who I am. And even if your opinion is wrong, like if I say I'm bisexual, I know people think about me when I say that. They're like, oh, you just want to sleep with anyone. You're probably going to date a man. You don't care about this. Everyone thinks that about me. But you know what? I know why I call myself bisexual. I call myself bisexual because I'm attracted to men and women and people who have no gender or people who have many genders. Gender doesn't matter to me. I like beautiful people. And you can call me a slut or whatever the fuck you want or think that about me. But that's my label and I like it. I like being bisexual. I like being a feminist. I like being an intersectional feminist. And yes, it comes with a lot of baggage. And yes, I argue with other feminists, and that's okay. I don't need to agree with every feminist. I don't even agree with every black feminist. I don't agree with everything that Roxane Gay says or that Bell Hooks says. But that's why we have dialogue. That's why we communicate. That's why we talk. It's about us as a community wanting to help each other and to be better through that dialogue. We cannot improve if we are just a monolith or if we just agree with everything that we all, if one person says it has to be law. That's never the way it's been. And fundamentally, what feminism means to me, and intersectional feminism means to me, is that the world knows that we are different in certain ways. But those differences do not matter when it comes to accessing healthcare, accessing, and what jobs you get and how you are paid. That our differences will not make life harder for us. That just because I'm a woman, I am not going to have a harder life because of that. That is what I'm working towards. And that because I'm a queer woman, I don't have to have a harder life because, a trans woman doesn't. I don't want people to suffer, I guess. I remember reading Half the Sky and just crying because I couldn't help them. Because I realized that I could do nothing, but I wanted to scream. I wanted to be like, I wanted to speak for them and let everyone know that this was happening. I wanted to have a voice for other people who were like me. And thinking about all the brown girls in those places who didn't have access to healthcare, who were in these terrible situations, it made me want to do more. When I hear stories about women who are like caught up in sex trafficking and boys who are beaten because they're not, masculine enough, and when I hear those things, it is a call to action for me to do more, to be more, and to be seen as someone who can do more. And that's why I take on feminism. And that's why, despite all the things that are a problem with it and all the things that I argue with about it, and despite that it is going through, I think feminism right now, and this third, leading into maybe fourth wave, it's just going through all of these weird dialogues. Because for the first time, I think feminism is bigger than it's ever been before. And there are so many voices and so many people who want to be a part of it, but don't necessarily know How? Because what a feminist is now is so different from what it was when we were kids. And it's different from when our parents were kids. And so on and so forth. It is a growing experiment that we are a part of and that we're trying to make better. And all we can do is play our part. And I think for women of color who are feminists, for us it's like, we've always worked, we've always toiled, we always had to fight for our femininity. So our needs for feminism are different. And it's not always acknowledged what those differences are. I think that, especially with choice feminism, for example, like the idea of the beauty stuff is like, well, for black women, with our beauty being something that was denied for us for so long, it's important to us to be seen as, not just be seen as beautiful, per se, but to be seen as women. To be seen as women in a world that desexualized us for so long. Like, owning our sexuality is important to us. It is a necessary part of who we are because of our heavily sexualized existence as a people. And so for me, yes, when Rihanna dances around half naked and talking about sex with me is so fantastic, to me, that makes me feel good. It's an empowering thing, not because your sexuality defines you, but because it's like, here is a black woman who owns her shit, who owns who she fucks, owns how she gets her shit. That's empowering because that's not something that we were able to do our whole lives. And because for us to own our sexuality is a meaningful thing. And so when we try to make feminism this one thing for all people, it's never going to work. The idea of fixing it so that it's like this one radical thing is never going to work to me, because everyone needs something different from feminism. And we need to talk about what those things are that we need. And the only way that we're going to do that is if we communicate with each other and don't just assume that because, oh, you just care what men think. Oh, you just want to do this and not care about the capitalist aspect of it. It's so much more complicated than that. And to ignore that is going to keep people from really being a part and growing with this movement. Anyway, thank you for listening to my rambles. I know these videos turn into rambles because I just have so many feelings, and like when I write it down, it never even comes out as good as I want it to be. But when I just talk, I feel like at least even if it's not perfect, you guys understand what I mean and how I feel, and that feels good. Anyway, so I hope you enjoyed this. We have one more video to go that's black specific. Next week is going to be the who's who in black history that you don't fucking know about. And then we'll be talking about some feminism stuff indefinitely. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for watching these videos, and I will see you soon. Blah, blah.